of Olas. Previously, he worked for British Sky News and is like an OG in the crypto scene since like forever.
Perfect.
Take it away.
Okay, so how do we tell good opinions from bad? And specifically in the context where we're all here today, how do we tell good opinions from bad on open publishing systems, essentially opinion media? Is such a thing even possible? Generally, when we want to get to the bottom of things, we reach for one or both of two tools humanity has for the job, and that is markets and reputation. This is the skin in the game thesis. This social capital, our monetary capital, is on the line, and this kind of sharpens us, and we produce better information as a result. However, most market and forecasting tournament designs that are out there right now, they require verifiable events to settle. Will Israel attack Iran before the end of June? Will Messi score in the goal in the game tomorrow? These things have to happen for us to settle the market. The problem with that is that most questions that interest us, and therefore that media writes about, are things that involve unverifiable questions. So they're things like long-term predictions. Is Russia right here? Will oil and gas be booming in 2050? It would be good to know the answer to that because a whole bunch of countries committed to net zero by 2050, and I personally would like to know if they're lying or misguided. Here's a counterfactual, for example. Sorry, the text has gone weird. Would the new VAR rules, for people who know football, would they, if they didn't exist, would Amonyi not been injured? Again, the rule-making body might like to know the answer to that when they're making rules again. Are speculations of intent? Did Trump really ease off on the Chinese tariffs because he was losing support in his base? Or was it the bond market that forced his hand? Or was it just a case that negotiations were going pretty well? Or was it a combination of those things? Again, there's people out there who probably know the answer to that question, and we'd all be better off if we knew the answer as well, because we'd be able to plan for next time he decides to do something crazy. When I bring these kind of ideas to people, I often get like a lot of pushback, people saying like, how on earth can you settle a market when you don't know, when the event never happens? And the example I give is, imagine I went up to the top of that building across the road and jumped. If I asked you what would happen to me, you'd all go, you'll die. Now, I feel pretty good about my life, so I'm not going to give you that settling event, but we all know that would happen. And for all these questions I've just shown, and many other things that are found in media, there are people out there in the world that have the same degree of certainty about those answers as we all do about my survival chances from jumping off that massive building. So what we need is a system that brings these people to the fore, so it improves our collective knowledge. The problem with vanilla markets and forecasting tournaments is that in the absence of a settling event, people who hold a minority view, they don't enter the market because they have no reason to believe that people will come around to their way of thinking. They have information that other people don't have. And in the absence of a verifiable event, they have no real reason to believe people will change their minds. So the problem with that is then the market devolves into a popularity contest. And the paradox of that is that even the popular view becomes overpopulated, and even if you agree with it, you won't enter the market because it's just not value. So you end up with a market with low liquidity and a bad signal. So the recipe for success, if we're to build a market that will work in this scenario, is first of all, we need an incentive system that will incentivize people to bet on their true beliefs, not what they believe is the popular belief. And this includes the contrarians. And then at least we'll be able to settle a market on endogenous fundamental beliefs rather than an exogenous verifiable event. Now, does such a system exist? Yes, it does. These very clever people at MIT invented a mechanism called Bayesian Truth Serum, and like many very useful mechanisms we have, and our very useful inventions, full stop, we have in the world, it was actually invented for a very different purpose. And that is to solve the perennial problem of people lying in surveys. And they do it even if they're anonymized. People have a real hard time writing down an opinion they believe would be frowned upon by large parts of society, even if it's private. And this goes down to like surveys about willingness to pay taxes. Often people are asked, would you pay higher taxes if it would fund more schooling? They'll say yes, and then they get to the ballot box and they vote for a politician who's cutting taxes. Same with support for immigration, and then in psychology, people have always had a very hard time admitting they take recreational drugs, even if they do. So this is the problem's known as social desirability bias, and it's actually completely analogous to the issue I was just talking about in markets. So the guys at MIT came up with a very clever mechanism to solve this problem. It's a dual question format where they first of all ask people what their own answer is, and then they think they're asked what they think everyone else will say as well. And they're scored on both sides of the equation. First of all, how close their own prediction is to the crowd, and second of all, how surprisingly common their own answer is. And I'll come back to that now in a second. So yeah, it's a dual system scoring rule. Your information score and your prediction score. Your information score is the actual percentage minus the expected percentage. I'll give you an example to make that more easy to understand. So let's go back to the recreational drugs example. Let's say somebody here is asked if they take recreational drugs, and they're honest, and they say, yes, I do. And the crowd predicted 20% of people would give that answer, but in fact, 40% of people gave it. That's a 20 percentage point surprise, meaning you'll get a very good score. And then your prediction score is how close you were to that 40%. If you predicted 39%, you're going to do really well. If you predicted 0%, you're going to do very badly. Now, the genius of this system is that it creates an honesty-Nash equilibrium. If you lie on one side of the equation to either boost your score on that side or the opposing side, you will hurt your score on one side. It basically makes it, over enough questions, it's unprofitable to lie. So it's this perfect system that rewards truth, basically. So it's exactly what we need. We need incentives that rewards truth-telling. That includes contrarians, and because the score is computed entirely from peer data, there's no verifiable event that's required. Now, that's part of the battle. We've got the incentives right, but remember, the overall goal here is to grade opinions on the internet. So we need to take this data and aggregate it. Now, the guys at MIT were actually sitting on this system for years because they'd invented it for a completely different reason. And about 10 years afterward they realized the aggregate of the information score itself is really predictive of the true answer. And there's the reason for that is rooted in Bayesian statistics. If you have a very good insight into what the crowd thinks, but then you yourself give another answer, it is very indicative that you once upon a time held the same opinion the crowd has, but you got new information and updated your views, your prior versus your posterior in Bayesian speak. And this system captures this, basically. It finds people who are ahead of the curve and elevates them. And it's been shown in numerous studies that it's not just theory, it's very predictive. Now, the problem with these systems, they're as designed, they're made for categorical answers. But the world is more nuanced than yes and no. So we had to adapt this for continuous probabilities. Like any type of market allows you to express confidence with a bet size. Forecasting tournaments, you can give a probability of like 60%, 15%, etc. So we need to adapt these systems for that, which is really hard. A couple of people have tried in academic papers, and I personally think they've failed. I'm not going to go into it today because this presentation is longer than my allotment. But the way we are solving it, we're using these things called kernel density estimates. We ask people two questions again as well, but this time your probability. So let's say 60%, and then what you think the average crowd probability will be. And we apply kernel density estimates. So it's basically you start with an x-axis. Let's say somebody says 20%, the next person says 30%, and a mound starts congregating in that area. And then we superimpose both. That's our UI, by the way, what it will look like. So you pick both questions, and then you superimpose both charts. And this blue area, where P is proud of M, the meta probability, that's the surprisingly common, insightful members of the crowd that get paid, basically. And then finally, we take the surprisingly popular answer insights and adopt them to continuous probabilities as well. you take somebody's primary probability, and let's say they were very good at guessing where the crowd is, they get upweighted. If they diverged from where the crowd is, they get upweighted as well. And then generally, tried and tested method in forecasting, if they've got a very good history of doing well at forecasts, they get upweighted as well. Again, there's a whole lot of academic papers supporting these techniques, and we're going to apply them. Now, we're not under any illusion. When we launch this, it's going to be a little bit like GPT-3 or 1 or whatever. We'll be constantly perfecting this with data, but at least we know we're going in from a place where there's 15, 20 years of research science backing this stuff up. Again, this is what our UI will look like. There can be many humps, by the way. These are all profitable positions. That would be the overall market score up there. And yeah, just to sign off, it's absolutely essential both scoring systems are separate, because otherwise it becomes a popularity contest. You have an aggregator that gives an accuracy-seeking verdict on each opinion, and you have Bayesian Truth Serum that rewards readers whose insight made that verdict possible. And although it seems complicated from a UX perspective, readers just need to know they answer 2 questions, and honesty is their most profitable strategy. And that's basically it. We at Olas have been working on this for quite some time. We're going to launch a competition or tournament in about a month, which is open to anyone. So if you want to earn tokens by literally telling the truth and your truth is insightful, have at it. Olas.info. Thanks very much.